Let's start with that. Let's focus on that whole learning
Sure.
styles debate, and let's get very clear on that for people that are listening. And
Okay.
maybe we can, make the definitive statement and make a stand right now.
Okay, folks. So now for your auditory learners, I suggest you turn off the video now. And for those of you who are just visual learners, I suggest you turn off the audio and you can just watch me and learn.
I
Oh,
suppose I suppose that's how it goes.
I'll tell you one thing. If I have a surgeon, I do not want them to be an auditory learner. I want them to know the feel of that scalpel going
Yeah.
through the skin.
Eh,
Like,
well, is it? We want them to be a tactile learner, then, right?
that's right. So here's the deal. Look, people do have different learning preferences, right?
Yeah.
And that's based on your experience of what you've learned with. But there's also some reality here. Human cognition is, for a majority of it's visual anyway. All of us are more heavily utilizing our visual perceptual channels than any other channels that we have.
Yeah.
So we have to know that. So a couple of years, you mentioned this award thing. So a bunch of years ago, I think it's 6 or 8 years ago, I was suspicious of this learning style stuff. So I offered $1,000 to anyone who could prove that they could create a program that was better by taking learning styles into account than if they weren't taking learning styles into account. And no one ever came and claimed that. So a couple of people said to me, Will, maybe $1,000 isn't enough. Um, uh, Guy Wallace and Tyagi told me, "Hey, we'll give in money." And so there's a bunch of us that have now made it up to $5,000, and we did that last year and put the challenge up there. And no one's come and claimed the money yet. And what's interesting is that some heavy duty scientific researchers were concerned about this learning style, so interested in seeing whether it really had an effect or not. And what they found was that there's no evidence that taking learning styles into account improves learning results. There's no evidence that taking learning styles into account improves learning results. We don't want to be too hard on folks who have, who are trying to reach their learners. I mean, that's a good thing, right? We should reward that. We should, acknowledge it. But when they come off and say, well, I need to do this for my visual learners, right? That's focusing on something that's proven ineffective when you could be using your time to focus on something that's more effective, right? And I think maybe you and I could talk about this later in this conversation. There is now, the science of learning has bubbled up in the last 2 decades, some really strong foundational stuff about what we should be doing in learning. I have this concept, I call it the learning DNA or the learning genome. In the human genome, some of our DNA matters a lot more than other aspects of it. I mean, they talk about maybe up to 90 to 95% of our DNA being junk DNA. It means it doesn't do that much. And like 99% of our DNA is the same as a chimpanzee's or a bonobo's, right? So clearly some DNA matters more than other DNA. It's the same with learning. Some learning factors matter a hell of a lot more than other learning factors. So why focus on these things that have less potency when we could be focusing on the things that really matter? Things like retrieval practice and context alignment and feedback and spacing and grabbing attention. I mean, there's just so many things that are important